Hey everyone, welcome back. It is Icon here. Thank you so much for checking out another episode of Esports Analysis. Today is the day we're breaking down Championship Sunday of CDL Chicago. First thing I want to do is I want to go back. I want to talk through the matches from Saturday. I want to adjust our bracket. I ended up getting all of my predictions right except for one match, one that really, I thought this was one of the easier ones to call, but we'll talk through that. And then we'll go through and we'll talk about who I expect to win when it gets down to the semifinals. So as we hop into this, the first match of the day was Seattle versus Empire. This was a fairly well contested match. I really did expect Dallas to win, as they did. So you can see over here, I took Dallas and I moved them down. They were in the semifinals, and that's what ended up happening. That put Seattle in the losers bracket finals here. That would happen later on in the day. And I don't know, this tournament is really the first time that I've been really impressed with Seattle. I'm impressed with what they're doing. They seem to be getting more help than other than just Octane, right? Octane has been playing well the entire year, and now his teammates are starting to come along a little bit. And that's really nice to see, because when this league started, that was one of those teams that a lot of people picked kind of like in their top 6 or so when it came to power ranking. So it's nice to see them producing. After that, we went over here to Atlanta versus New York. And again, it seems like whenever these two teams play, it's just close, right? It just seems like New York kind of on respawns has Atlanta's number a little bit. So it did end up going the entire distance. Atlanta ended up winning, so that put Atlanta down here into the winner's bracket, into the semifinals for tomorrow. And then that put New York into the losers bracket final for Group A, which would be played later in the day. But it did go down to that search and destroy, which Atlanta won. I believe it was 6-1. It really wasn't close at all. But the map before that, the hard point on St. Petrograd, New York won 250 to 80. It was just a complete beatdown. And every once in a while, when these two teams match up, you see stuff like that. I remember the very first weekend, New York had a really rough start to the season. But that first weekend, New York came out, and that domination on Hackney Yard, Minnesota opening launch weekend, was one of the most dominant performances that we've seen. And every once in a while, they have the ability to turn it on like that. I was a little bit shocked later on here because New York played so well, and we'll talk about that later. But overall, it just seemed that those hard points, New York really had Atlanta's number, and that's something to watch for moving forward because New York is playing out of their minds, and I don't know, I'm happy to see that. So after that, we went back over to Group B, and we played the losers bracket semi for group play over here, which was OGLA versus LAG, so the Battle of Los Angeles. And this was the one that I ended up getting wrong. I just felt like coming into this, Optic might have finally found their way with their most recent performance. They've been playing really well, but that's not how it went. So I'm going to go ahead, and this is the one change I have to make. I'm going to go in, and I'm going to take OGLA out of there. I will say that you really did have an underwhelming performance this weekend from especially players like TJ. I think TJ had like a 0.8. JCap was okay, but again, you don't expect the big numbers out of JCap. TJ was the one that I was really kind of disheartened by, because if he plays well, then they play well. Same with like Kenny. Kenny's kind of one of those cogs that makes them play well. But Los Angeles, Vivid played phenomenal. I thought Vivid had the best performance in this losers bracket semis here, and that's what those young guns for LAG are capable of. Eventually, when they start to feel a little bit more comfortable, these good performances will happen more often, and I'm excited to see that happen for them, because I think LAG was the one team that said, you know what, this isn't working at the beginning of the season. They made their change. They brought in their 3 new players, and it seems to be paying off. Just, it's not paying off like every match they're blowing people out, but it seems like every tournament they're in, you see, bright signs here and a really good map there. And eventually, when those start to steamroll, I think they have a productive future there with those guys. So LAG moved on, which put us into those finals for group play there. Actually, no, wait. before that, so we had the losers bracket semi for Group B. We had the losers bracket semi for Group A after that. So Chicago versus London. And this is one that I wasn't really confident in, and it kind of played out that way a little bit. So just to recap here, the first hard point was super close. After that, Chicago won the search and destroy on Gunner. They won at 6-1. Super easy time there. That was never contested at all. After that, the domination, which I was a little bit shocked by on St. Petrograd, the dom on St. Petrograd, the first few tournaments, that was going really well. Envoy always pops off on St. Petrograd, but London just came out and they beat them almost 2-1. It was 195 to 102. So really nice bounce back there from London. So at that point in time, as we moved on to the next hard point, it was 2-1, and it came down to the wire, and Chicago was able to clutch up. They didn't have spawns for the last set of rotations there. They were able to overtake on a Zir Cave, and they were able to just barely get those last few seconds. But that very easily could have been 2-2. Then the search and destroy would have been Ramaza, and we've already seen this tournament that Chicago didn't look real great on search and destroy on Ramaza. So although they won 3-1, that doesn't tell the entire story. It was 2-1, very easily could have been 2-2, and then if that goes to search on Ramaza, who knows what happens. So it was really fortunate for Chicago that they were able to clutch up there, which put them into the finals for group play against New York. So out of all of these matchups, the only one that I missed was the LAG one there. We still have a couple to talk about here, and the first one was the losers finals here between Seattle and LAG, and I correctly guessed this one. I don't know. Every time Seattle plays, I'm getting a little bit more confident in their performance. And the one thing that really sticks out for me is not their performance on search, right? At the beginning of the year, they weren't really playing all that great in search and destroy. In fact, it was probably their worst game mode. It was their worst game mode. But what surprised me in this matchup was their ability to hang with LAG in the respawns. So they came out of the gates, the hard point on Ramaza, they won 250 to 103. And when you think about that, that is super impressive considering how LAG looked earlier in the day. That, I think, really set the tone for the rest of that matchup. And I was really impressed with that performance there. They did end up losing the domination. And then again, this was kind of the same. They won that last hard point at St. Petrograd 250 to 223. But it's kind of the same thing, right? A rotation or so doesn't go their way. Now all of a sudden we're going to search and destroy on Ramaza, and the search earlier was a lot closer than it seemed. So they were able to clutch up. They were able to win 3-1, but just like the matchup with Chicago that we just talked about, didn't really tell the entire story. So Seattle was able to knock out LAG, which puts Seattle into the semifinals. So that's our first semifinal matchup. We have Atlanta versus Seattle, and we'll talk about that in a moment as soon as we review this rematch from day one. So when I made this prediction yesterday, I just felt like those maps with New York were so close. I just felt like once they got back into the groove of it, I don't have the most confidence in Chicago at the moment, but I did feel like they were going to be able to figure it out a little bit. So just going through this, the first map was hardpoint on Gunrunner. They lost. So it was 250 to 195, a New York subliner victory. And you started to think a little bit, well, Mac was frying, right? Mac has really been the difference maker. Mac came out, he was frying. They looked basically unstoppable in the respawns, which they have been all weekend. They played great against Atlanta also, which we already talked about. Then it went to the search. And the search, I think, settled things down a little bit. It was 6-3. And then came the domination victory. And I don't know if that took the wind out of the sails in New York, but the ability for Chicago to clutch up in the last 15, 20 seconds there and steal that domination, that's one of the things that separates these veteran-laden teams from a lot of the teams like LAG that have a lot of youngsters and stuff like that, is that every once in a while when they're put into a scenario where they have to clutch up, their backs are against the wall, they're able to do it. You probably, I mean, you see that with Atlanta. You've seen that from time to time with Dallas, with Chicago. Especially you have seen that with Minnesota, with some of their late game heroics. So that was probably absolutely the moment of the day on Saturday for me. That was super exciting to watch. And I don't want to say exciting. It was intense, right? You felt the intensity on that map. So Chicago was able to win that. And then as it went down to the last hard point, I really do think it took the wind out of the sails for New York. Chicago ended up winning 250 to 167, which eliminated New York and put Chicago into the semifinal against Dallas. So as we are moving on here, let's talk about Championship Sunday. So we have Atlanta versus Seattle. We have Dallas against Chicago. Now, Seattle's been playing really well. I'm really impressed. I think that they could easily elevate themselves from the bottom of the league, just like New York. So as I'm kind of looking at the standings, I could see Seattle and New York slowly start to move their way up into playoff contention, while Paris and London would slowly start to play themselves out. If you think about this weekend, London was one of the teams, London and OGLA, they were the two teams that didn't get a single point from this weekend. And I don't feel a lot of confidence in London and even Paris that I did at the beginning of the year. So New York is coming on strong. Seattle's coming on strong. I could see those two teams start to work their way up into playoff contention. With that being said, I just don't think they have the firepower against Atlanta here. I think Atlanta moves on. Now, not saying that I wouldn't like to see it, right? I would love to see Seattle in a final here. I think it would be good for the league. I think those veterans and the presence that they bring, Karma and Octane and all of those guys, I think seeing them in a final would be really good for the league. I just don't think that they're quite on Atlanta's level, even though Atlanta has shown that they're vulnerable. On land, it might be a little bit of a different story. I know that they got eliminated, and Minnesota seems to be their nemesis, but I don't know. Even though they do look like they're beatable, especially in those maps against New York, I just don't see it happening here. So we're going to go ahead. We're going to put Atlanta into the final, which most people would probably predict. And the big one, the hardest one here to predict, is going to be Dallas against Chicago in this other semifinal. Now, the first thing that I'll say is that Envoy looked back to form, right? He had a really good day on Saturday. The other thing that I'll talk about is Arcides looked really good and Gunless looked really good. Now, Formal has been he's not quite up to what we're used to seeing from Formal. Scump has looked kind of mediocre, but Envoy looked like typical Envoy, and Arcides and Gunless both came up clutch a couple times. So this is a tough one, because when you look across, the young guns from Dallas have been playing good all weekend. It started with Shotzi. Illy has been playing like we know Illy is capable of playing. So there really are bright spots to both of these teams. It's just, how are you feeling? For me, it comes down to the search and destroy, and we all know the difference, especially with all the drama with the Arcides interview this week. We know that one team is clearly above the other in search and destroys. So for me, I know it's the Chicago event, but because of the search and destroys, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put Dallas through, which means this is going to be the first tournament all year where we're going to have a repeat winner, right? We're going to have a two-time champion. We haven't had it yet, but with this matchup between Atlanta and Dallas, that means somebody is going to win their second tournament of the year. And for me, I think this will be really close. I think in the respawns, if this was on land, we would expect Atlanta to win these respawns easily, but I think these will probably be split, and I think that they'll be really close. Atlanta doesn't look as beatable online as they've shown on land. like we just saw with their matchup against New York, they've really struggled in those hard points. So I don't have the utmost confidence in them, but if you're looking top to bottom, you would probably say, as most people have said all year, that they've definitely got the more dominant lineup. If you look at the search and destroys, these are probably the top 2 search teams in the league. So those will also be really close. Like with the Dallas and Chicago prediction, there's a clear discrepancy in search and destroy. These 2 teams are really close. So when it comes down to it, I think, and I'm not 1,000% confident in this, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give this to Dallas. I think Dallas is going to pull it out. I think overall, I think these teams are really close, right? I think when you talk about, again, just to go through it, the Atlanta has shown, at least they showed on Saturday, that they're beatable in the respawn game types, and we know how good Dallas can be in search and destroy. So I could be totally wrong. This could easily be a 3-0 in way of Atlanta, but for me, I'm going with Dallas. I think that they're the more rounded team. I think that they're not that Atlanta is ill-prepared, but I think there are very few organizations out there as prepared as Dallas is in search and destroy. If Illy and Shotzi can play the way that they've been playing, if Shotzi pops off in this matchup, it's going to be great for him, but it'll kind of be super rewarding for Dallas because that's what they've been waiting for. So I'm going to go with Dallas to win this thing. It could totally be wrong. I do expect Atlanta in the final. But come championship Sunday, we will see what happens. So down in the comments below, let me know how you disagree with me. I love going through, reading your comments, reading your predictions, seeing what your motives are behind those, like why you think something's going to be different from what I picked. So please leave a comment down below. I'd love to see it. If you're new around here, this is your first time checking out one of my videos, I put out brand new videos, mainly map analysis videos every single day. So make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of that. Make sure you leave a like before you head on your way. And thank you guys so much. Enjoy watching Championship Sunday. We'll talk about it tomorrow in our recap upload. Have a good rest of your day. We'll see you guys.